Hello again. Welcome back and good morning or very early morning to our guests from BC, Mike and James, who are joining us today. We're now on to our sixth webinar of the Industry Future Challenge 2023 project. As you know, my name is Ravi Dindyal, your host for today and Chief Experience Officer at Prepper. As part of our mission here at Prepper, we aim to upskill and inspire Canadian innovation. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the National Research Council, Magnet, and Linux for enabling us to deliver this program in order to be a catalyst of change and innovation in Canada. So let's get to it. Our topic today, wildfires, or forest fires, as some of us call it. So we're exploring the impact of forest fires and discussing the political and social science and technology-based solutions. So as you know, there's four different components. Some of you that are new are joining us, but basically the Industry Future Challenge, or the IFC, is broken into 4 steps. Step 1 is really doing what we're doing today, which is exploring certain topics, segments, industry sectors. We've done food, energy, and other topics, and today our focus is on the environment. So step 1 is to have our expert panelists discuss this topic. Step 2 is to identify interesting challenge statements that we could use to identify problems and hopefully create sparks of innovation and innovative solutions to those problems. And then step 3 is to submit the challenge statements. However, for today, what's interesting is that the agenda, what we're doing is just really changing it up. So we're going to do the challenges live instead of having the session and then doing the challenges after. So for 11 to 11:45, we'll have our panel discussions, and then 11:45 to 12:15, we'll break out into groups and group work to build the pitch, and then we will do group presentations or individual presentations. The motivation for this is obviously to spark Canadian innovation and help solve some of these really important issues. But there's also a $500 Visa gift card, cash card for first prize, $250 for second prize, and other related prizes. So definitely worth the investment. So that's the agenda for today. So let's jump into our topic and panelists. So why this particular topic in regards to the environment? And we know definitely for each of these sectors, we hone in on something. Environment is obviously a broad topic, but in 2023 was the most extensive and destructive wildfire season on record, according to the BC Wildfire Service. We saw images of people fleeing their cars and jumping into the ocean to escape wildfires raging through the island of Maui. For the majority of the population in Canada, these fires usually don't directly affect us and our lives, since we live in large cities that are far away. However, this year, our skies turned orange and the air was harder to breathe. This happened in Toronto, something that I have never seen in my lifetime living here. This was also the case in Montreal and even far away as New York, bringing the issue closer to home for those of us living in these big cities. Usually, Canada provides firefighting support to other countries that need help. But I remember seeing a TikTok video of South African firefighters singing and dancing after arriving in an Alberta airport, at the Alberta airport, sorry. That was a really cool part of their tradition as firefighters. But again, I've never seen that. We're usually the country offering help to to our neighbors. So yes, wildfires was a big part of our news cycle this summer. And I have a feeling that is going to be the norm if we don't figure out ways to better control this global issue. So that's our goal today. So let's get to it and kick things off with some intros from our panel. So why don't we start with you, Cheryl? Good morning.
Oh, good morning. I'm really pleased to be here. I just have a few slides to share. They're sort of on the social science end. Or am I supposed to just say hi or do a little blurb right now?
Yeah, just do a blurb on yourself while I try to find your deck.
Okay, I just sent you an email. So I'm Cheryl Evans. I'm the Director of Flood and Wildfire Resilience at the Intact Center. And we're a center that takes technical information, works with a wide variety of organizations across Canada, and figures out how to apply it in communities so that people understand what their risks are, identify really practical opportunities to reduce their risks, take action, and then keep taking one step at a time to do better. If we don't have the decks, that is okay. The main point of the decks is that we look at losses over the last 50 years. And what we're really seeing when we look at insurable loss data, this is put together by the insurance industry across Canada. From about 1983 to 2009, the insurance industry could expect about $300 to $400 million a year for these very large losses that are related to climate change, such as windstorms, hail, and of course wildfires. Then things started to trend upward in 2009, and we started to see that that there was no combined loss for a year below $1 billion, except for 1 year. And now we're looking at an average of 3 billion a year, or sorry, 2 billion a year. I just got word from IBC, their estimated total for this year related to the wildfire losses about 3 billion. Next, please. Thanks. So when we talk about those losses, those insured losses, we've got one for every dollar that is insured, we've got 3 to 4 that is not insured. So government businesses are bearing the brunt of those costs. And of course, there's physical stress, health issues, loss of business that are also really hard to quantify in terms of dollar figures. So what we talk about at the Intact Center is how to combine the best of physical sciences, which Mike really is an amazing innovator in, with the social sciences. How can we raise awareness and support action? And it's that sweet spot in the middle where we support climate ready action and get people to take action one step at a time. Next, please. This is a lot of text, but in the grand scheme here, everything that we do is a journey. It's moving from not even being aware of a problem to identifying risks, identifying opportunities, taking one step at a time. And then at the very top is to change behavior, to have good maintenance behaviors. So this chart just talks about all the different outreach tactics and tools we can use to help people move from one step to the next. Next, please. So we work with a lot of external organizations to develop technical guidance, but one of our goals is to work with communities and make sure that residents understand the guidance in a practical stepwise way. So these are some infographics that we've created to help people reduce risk at the home level for flood, wildfire, and extreme heat. And of course, in the real world, all of these are interconnected. So I'll wrap that up for now. But I guess one last thought is that everything that we're doing is identifying where gaps in knowledge are and figuring out how to work together to address those gaps so that we can move forward. So I'm excited about this opportunity because it really talks about innovation, the innovation space. That's where we work, and that's where we need work we need to collaborate in community to keep evolving our solutions with the changing climate. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was great. And good to have your perspective on the social aspect and the educational aspect, I guess. So really looking forward to digging into that with you. Over to you, Mike.
Good day, everyone. My name is Mike Flanagan. I'm the research chair for Predictive Services, Emergency Management, and Fire Science. Yes, it's a mouthful. I'm a fire guy. I've been studying fire and weather for many decades. And there's a few things we need to know about fire before we can fix the problem. We have to understand the problem. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about. And this year is exceptional. We're about 18 million hectares. That number probably doesn't mean much to you, but that's the size of New Brunswick, 2 Nova Scotias, and throw in a couple Prince Edward Islands as well. That's the amount of area that's burned. And the recipe for wildfire is simple. You need 3 ingredients only. And the first is vegetation. We call it fuel because it's the stuff that burns. Grass, needles, leaves, shrubs, trees, you name it. When things are right, it burns. Second, ignition. Human caused and lightning caused. About 50-50 in Canada. And third is extreme weather. And that's a key role in many disasters. Hot, dry, windy for fire. You have all 3, you have a fire, and we had it in spades this year. So evacuations, 200,000 people about. That's 1 out of every 200 people in Canada was evacuated. Expenditures, normally it's about $1 billion for the whole year in Canada. BC alone is approaching $1 billion. Emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from fires exceeded what we normally produce from fossil fuels. Next slide, please. I just have a few slides here. And these are the top 10 natural disasters for insurance payouts. And you see Fort McMurray on the left is number 1. These are insurable losses. And you see the BC alone wildfires, and Cheryl just updated that number for Canada to be closer to 2 billion. Much of this is happening in BC, and this is from a few weeks ago. Next slide. I live in Kamloops, British Columbia, and this graph shows annual area burn from 1950 to present. The last 7 years in green there has burned more than the previous 58. We're seeing more fire in Canada and more fire in BC, and BC is the tip of the spear. It's just mind-boggling. This year is approaching the size of Vancouver Island burn, and our forests just cannot continue to take this amount of area burn because they won't regenerate. Our forests will disappear if we keep seeing fire like this, but this is exceptional. I'm not sure if we'll ever see a year as bad as this year. Next slide, please. And this is a graph is from the Canadian Disaster Database, and this is for fire. And you can see it's very similar to what Cheryl was showing. We're seeing more disasters. Now, this has a very long definition of what a disaster is, but most of these are evacuations, and that's what's causing it. I expect it to continue to spike, especially after this year. Next slide. And yes. So this is a question: Is this a fire? Is this a thunderstorm? Well, actually, it's both. Okay, this is taken from Sparks Lake, 2021, June 30th. And these are the types of things we're seeing now. And yes, they occurred in the past, but they're much more frequent, much more intense. It's a very challenging environment to manage wildfire, and it's becoming more challenging because people have higher expectations, and there's more development on the landscape. And because of climate change, we're seeing a lot more fire. And because of the intensity, they're difficult to impossible to extinguish. So that's our new reality. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Wow, yeah, thanks, Mike. That's great context and setting the stage of what's happened this year and what's happened in the past. Yeah, that was some really impactful slides. Thank you for that. James, over to you.
Yeah, I'm I'm just the layman. I just live in BC. I live in Vancouver. I survived the wildfires. I work here at Prepper. I'm one of the instructors, and yeah, I am bringing my sparkling personality and my on the ground experience to ask questions about from the experts here. That is me.
Yeah, James. James is being humble. He's one of our digital instructors, course instructors here at Prepper, and he's going to feel free, James, jump in and help out on the question side.
Definitely.
All right. Thanks for the intro, guys. Again, so first question: is it forest fires or wildfires? What is the right terminology, or is there one?
Lots of different terms: wildfires, forest fires, bush fires, wildland fires. a lot of the communities moving to vegetation fires because of the term wild, and some are forest, some are grass fires. Vegetation fires is not everyone, but that's where a lot of the movement is towards. But
Okay.
there's a separation between structural fire, your house catches on fire, versus vegetation burning. So I like vegetation fires, but it's not adopted by everyone yet.
Got it. Got it.
Doesn't really roll off the tongue as easily, I guess, right?
Yeah, vegetation fire. So guys, just jump in as I ask these questions. Please feel free. If we have a small panel, so Cheryl and James, jump in as you feel necessary. Yeah, one of my first questions really was to start to set the stage around like context for what happened, what's happening right now in 2023. And I think Mike, your deck kind of started that and really showcased it. So I guess a follow-up question to that is, what made 2023 so special? Or is this like, is 2024, 2025 going to be worse than 2023? Or was this an anomaly year?
This is an exceptional year. The previous record was around 7 million hectares. So this year is 2.5 times larger than that. And, an interesting facet of fire, it varies from year to year, and it varies a lot. Like over 700 times difference between the smallest year and the biggest year for British Columbia, which is just mind-boggling. And why is that? It's the weather. We saw extreme weather and drought all across much of Canada. And I've never seen Canada on fire all at the same time. Usually it's in the west, or it's in the central, or it's out east, but the whole country was on fire. And that's just, there was never a year like this. It started early with record-breaking temperatures. And maybe I'll take a quick aside. Our area burned in Canada has doubled since the 70s. And this is largely due to human-caused climate change. I can't be any clearer than that. And so we expect this to continue. And people say, well, why is temperature so important? And here I'm not talking about the Fort Mac fire or the Lytton fire or the Maui fire. I'm talking about fire over a large area like Ontario or Quebec for a longer period of time, like decades. So the warmer it is, the longer the fire season. And we're seeing that in Canada.
Yeah.
The warmer it is, the more lightning there is. And lightning's a big player in fire. And third, the warmer it is, the more efficient the atmosphere, it's sucking the moisture out of the fuel, the vegetation. Here I'm talking about dead fuels in the forest floor, needles, grass, etc. And that means our fuels are going to be drier unless we see more rain, but we're not going to see enough rain to compensate for this warming. Drier fuels. And this is an important part of understanding fire. The drier the fuels, easier for fires to start, easier for fires to spread, and more fuels dried out. So it leads to higher intensity fires. That's difficult to impossible to extinguish.
Yeah. Related to how these fires get started, I know, Cheryl, your work is more on the human aspect and how, what are the habits that we need to socially understand and educate ourselves. Can you sort of expand on that as far as, are we too many campfires, lighting fireworks in the forest? Like, is there any factors like that are increasing this trend?
So yeah, the work that we really focus on is where the wildland mixes and mingles with human development. It's referred to as a clunky term, but the wildland urban interface. So in those areas, people are people. So if the fuels are dry, and people are doing something like having a campfire and the embers float up and they land on something, it can ignite it and then spread. If people drop cigarettes, if people are running ATVs in a forest, sparks can fly off and ignite fuels and spread. And in Nova Scotia this summer, you heard the fire chief desperately pleading, and the mayor desperately pleading to people to please listen to the instructions to reduce the risk of ignition. And a big part of that was thinking about how fire can start, how you can start a fire, and what you can do to reduce that risk. So the behavioral piece is critically important. And in my town of Meaford, in the spring here, it was very dry, and people were burning some of the farmers were burning some of the leftover crop on their fields, and then it was getting away. The wind, it was hot and dry. The wind took it away. So that can happen anywhere as well. Lots of different things. And another way to start a fire is if you have, say, an electrical line and it's not well maintained, maybe the insulation's starting to fall over or fall off. If it's too close to trees, it can touch and arc and start start fires as well. So maintaining industrial systems, electrical systems, industrial processes that have the potential to cause damage, that's also really important.
Yeah. Sorry, just kind of backtracking here to the Maui wildfire that happened, unfortunately, on that island. I think part of that was due to electrical wiring, right? That
Extremely strong winds. Yeah.
extremely strong winds that knocked down the power lines and then made it, the winds fueled the fire.
So for Canada, there's about 6,000 fires in an average year. About half of them are human caused and half are lightning caused. But the number of human caused fires has been decreasing. And I'd like to think this is because of education and perhaps because of fire bans and forest closures, which reduce the number of human caused fires. So this is all great. What many people probably don't understand is when a fire enters a community, it's through a rain of burning embers from the wildfire. And so this is the work that, Intact and Cheryl's group does, as well as other groups, Fire Smart. You got to reduce the likelihood of a fire starting in a community by dealing with those embers. And maybe over to you, Cheryl, about what we can do to reduce that likelihood.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks, Mike. When you think about embers, if you've been around a campfire, you can picture those floating pieces of material, hot material, floating around, and whatever they land on, they have the potential to ignite if that material is fine and dry, and ignitable. So, for example, what always strikes me is that if you think about these floating embers, which is what 50 to 90% of homes that are destroyed by wildfires, they're actually destroyed they are ignited and then eventually burnt out and destroyed by these floating embers. So if you think about what is the smallest stuff that these embers could ignite, think really, really small, something like grass. Keep your grass mowed to 10 centimeters or below. If you've got a wood pile that's stacked right beside your house, an ember or a rain of embers lands in there, slowly ignites bits of bark and material in there that preheats your house and gets that to ignite. So one of the most important things is to think about right around your house from the house to 1.5 meters out. Try to make sure that there's actually nothing ignitable there. Can you just take away any bark mulch and put maybe stone mulch there? Or if you've got planters, move them out further, away from 1.5 meters, move gas tanks away from the house at least 10 meters. Those are the really easy, inexpensive things you can do to start. And then with our 3 steps document, you can think about what are some other things that are a little bit more expensive to do. And then you get your list together, and eventually, as your old shingles are falling apart, put on Class A fire resistant shingles. Change out your decking to fire resistant decking that has that seals up the gaps in between the boards so that the embers can't get in between and start a fire underneath. So that you can handle these things one step at a time, but just think about what can you do one step at a time to reduce the likelihood that your home will ignite. The other important piece is that if your house is on fire and it's close to the neighbor's house, you have the potential to burn your neighbor's house down too. So the houses can sort of go up like dominoes one at a time. So it's important to work with your neighbors to think about what is the area around my home that has the potential to ignite and move the fire from to my house and then from my house to the neighbor's house. Just think about those falling dominoes and how can you stop them?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, is this for particular areas though? Like where I live, what you're just saying seems so foreign to me. I'm like, I don't need that, right? Like I'm in Pickering, Toronto, Ontario. I feel like that's so far away. But I mean, I'm assuming what you're talking to, there's probably highly vulnerable areas that people live in that are more vulnerable to forest fires, similarly to flooding. Is that? Yeah, is that like, I guess maybe a more direct question, like where are those areas? Is it where James lives or where Mike lives?
I think I'll defer to Mike on that one. He's the more of a technical guy, but there's always anomalies like Halifax, so we can talk about that too.
Yeah.
So it depends on your neighborhood. Okay. So if you're downtown Toronto, your place isn't going to burn down from a wildland fire. Your life can be miserable for a couple of weeks because of smoke from a fire 1,000 kilometers away, because smoke can travel, but you're not going to burn down. But if you're in a suburban Timmins adjacent to the forest, it's how close you are to vegetation. Then you should be looking at fire smart principles, removing flammable material near your house. And I'm glad you brought up, Cheryl, about I'm actually at the point where I think it has to be mandatory. And there are jurisdictions in California saying you cannot have flammable material within 5 feet, 1.5 meters for us, for our Canadians. And it makes a lot of sense because of the reason Cheryl just mentioned, because you may do everything right, but your neighbor doesn't, or vice versa. And fire is opportunistic. It's probing. It's just looking for the weakest link. So you're as strong as your weakest link. So if it's not mandatory, you could be, the cake could be baked, you could be snookered.
Yeah.
So there are national fire risk maps. There's a new effort from the Canadian Forest Service. It hasn't been released yet. That will have to be much more detailed than the current map is broad brush, which has, where I live, Kamloops in a moderate zone. And we're definitely not a moderate zone by any stretch. So, the states have house by house evaluation of risk. We're not there yet. We'll get there eventually, so that I can answer your question, Ravi. No, the threat of wildland fire or vegetation fire is essentially zero for you. Whereas Cheryl may say, where she lives, you should be doing fire smart. It may not be a forest fire. It may be grass fire, because the farmers are burning their fields. And grass fires, people tend to say, it's only a grass fire. Grass fires can kill. Grass fires can burn homes down. They are dangerous. You have to respect all fire. And, as we say, fire starts from a spark. And it can be from so many different sources. Some of them are directly, and most of these are not. Arson is about 1% to 3%, depending on the jurisdiction. Parts of the world, it's a little higher, but in Canada, it's not a big problem. But power lines, even small percentage, but they happen during extreme weather, and they happen close to communities. So that could be a problem. Railways. So humans and our activities. And that's why education and things like fire bans, I saw something in the chat, fire bans, you communicate it widely. And when extreme weather comes, and we had an event in British Columbia, Thursday, August 17th, and the whole week before, the BC Wildfire Service was saying, look out, there's a cold front coming. We're going to see extreme fire weather. So you communicate. Unfortunately, we still had, because there was so much fire in the landscape already, we still had damages, but communication, fire bans, closing the forest, very unpopular. That's when industry shuts down and no recreation's allowed. But it stops human-caused fires. It's very effective. And it was used a couple times this year in Alberta and Nova Scotia. Though, to be honest, it was used kind of too late. It was done after the event, the critical period. It should be done before the critical period. We often do it with fire bans. We're pretty good there, but forest closures were kind of after the fact, and that's too late.
Yeah. Maybe James, as a resident of BC, just curious on your experiences. It's your time to shine, James. How? Yeah, like, but seriously, it's more about what is your awareness? Based on these discussions, I'm sure like you go out, you're living there, you go camping, you sort of engage in those types of activities. Are you aware of some of these concepts? Like, what's your level of education?
Well, yeah, actually, this is some stuff that I wanted to kind of ask about. But I can obviously, yeah, I can speak on my experience. But then I really like to ask Cheryl and Mike about sort of how to kind of proliferate this education and how to get people aware of this stuff. Because so I, through the years, I have worked at a place called Barkerville for a couple summers. This was like 10, 15 years ago. Which is like way north in BC, and used to be like a gold mining town, and now it's like a living museum where people dress up as, I'm the miner of the town, and tourists take anyway. There's always forest fires up there every year, and at some point in the summer the whole area is just covered in smoke. And it's interesting because it becomes sort of almost bizarrely mundane in that, like, sort of like your day sort of adapts to it, and you become sort of like, well, this is what happens because this is the area you're in. And hearing questions about like, this isn't something I'm used to, so how do like Ravi, you're talking about picturing forest fires or what to do about forest fires and things like that, right? And I'm really curious about how sorry, I'm still waking up, so my brain is kind of making a few different connections here. I'm really curious about how you're seeing programs have success in raising awareness of these behaviors. I think it was Cheryl, you said that you're seeing a decrease in human-caused fires, and I'm curious, are there specific kinds of programs that you're seeing success with, or how you're kind of getting that awareness out?
Well, that was Mike actually that mentioned about the decreased number of human-caused fires. So yeah, people are listening, people are paying attention. I think one of the things that is important to know in our work around developing communications strategies with communities, one of the things we focus on is trying to figure out who is at highest risk in the community. Either their homes are most vulnerable because there's poor siding, or a lot of material around their homes. They're very close to the forest, very close to a grassland that tends to have a high ignition possibility. And then we figure out, okay, what are the practical ways to help them, and what do they know already? What are the things that they can do? And who do they listen to? Who do they trust? And then we try to figure out what is some core messaging that we can put together that's really simple, gets them started, and so that they can move along to the next steps. But figuring out how to take the people that they trust to deliver those clear and simple messages. And for example, like Canadian Red Cross, insurance companies, the local hardware store, that's a big one, the local media, neighborhood association leaders. And then once people actually make a change and start and do something, one of the most powerful things we encourage them to do is talk to their neighbors, family, and friends, because that's when you ask people how they rank trust, you have all different, like the university people or the government people, they're somewhere in the middle. The very top often comes up to family, friends, and neighbors. So you have to think about it as trying to figure out who are some people in your community that are trusted and influential. Work with them and get them to help spread the message, then get them to help spread the message. And programs like FireSmart are amazing because they have, community action days, they have awards, they have how-to videos, they have a lot of resources for people. They also have various funding programs. In BC right now, there's a pilot program with FireSmart BC. They take a document that Mike and I worked on with a group of people. That's a technical checklist, and they refer people to this technical checklist to make sure that they can access grants that can help them reduce wildfire risk around their homes. And then they give them money for either doing it themselves or paying a contractor to do it. So it's about raising awareness and then figuring out, where are people getting stuck? Do they need money? Do they need help? And then putting that help where it's needed to move them forward. Lots of really positive things happening.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's interesting. Is there, like, with the carbon tax, or you buy an EV, you get a tax incentive? Are those types of initiatives happening on the federal level or provincial level that you guys are aware of? So if I do fireproof shingles on my house, do I get a tax incentive for that? Can I write it off?
There are some municipal granting programs that provide support to upgrade your shingles or change your siding, etc. And then at the federal level, there's the Greener Homes program that it provides incentives to update your home. And there's some wiggle room, and we're working with the feds right now to expand the potential envelope for funding, to not look just at energy efficiency, but also resilient retrofits. So they've already posted some of our work, some of FireSmart's work, about practical things people can do to reduce their risk of flood, fire, extreme heat. And now we're trying to say to them, okay, can we get people to actually qualify for grants as part of this program to do that? And they're like, we'll get back to you. So we're working on that, but that's always evolving.
Sounds good. All right, guys, I'm going to shift off now to solutions. What are the sort of technical or scientific based and social science based solutions to protect us from or curb this phenomenon from happening? So first question, though, is who are the leaders that are developing technology in this area? Canada, definitely, this has been a traditionally summer issue for us as a country, and the US. But I don't know if Mike or Cheryl, on the issue of, who are the leaders globally in researching this issue or building solutions for it?
So I'll start. And from a research perspective, United States spends the most money, and they had disastrous fire season in the year 2000, and they started a program called the Joint Fire Science Program for funding research. And I used to go to fire meetings. If you had 80 people there, that was great. And now there's 1,000 people. And so, it's Europe is big into fire now. Australia, historically, it was Australia, Canada, and United States. Okay, but now fire is becoming a global issue, and we're spending a lot of money on it. I just want to say, technology can help address the problem, but they're tools. And whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, or drones, these are things we're going to use, but it's not a silver bullet. The bottom line is we're going to have to, just as in the past, we have to learn to live with fire and, unfortunately, the smoke that comes with it. And but there are things we can do. And FireSmart's one of them, and Cheryl has a list of things that we can do. Building materials. There's all sorts of things we can do to reduce the risk. And if you live in a forest, this is important because embers can travel long distances. And I've been studying fire for many decades, and every year fire surprises me. And the McDougall fire, which started on the west side of Okanagan Lake, I never expected to jump the lake. Okay, I have family in Kelowna, And I said, "Oh, you're safe. It won't jump the lake." It's never jumped the lake. It jumped the lake, which is 2.53 kilometers. So
Wow.
even though if you live, your community's in a forest within a couple of kilometers, you have to start thinking about flammable material around your house.
Yeah.
What are some things? What are some things that people can be doing, just like simple, sort of like day to day for themselves to help sort of mitigate impact of like smoke or things like that on their lives? Because as you were saying, and as I definitely experienced, I live in Richmond, or just sort of like right on the border of Richmond and Vancouver, and so obviously like forests themselves and vegetation themselves isn't a massive problem, but like the smoke just takes over, yeah, I'm just curious if there's anything simple, or if it's just the grander picture.
Yeah. Smoke kills 340,000 people prematurely every year. It's a significant cause of death.
Wow.
So shut your windows when the smoke event starts. Have air purifiers. They work, though you have to keep the filters changed. All right.
Right.
These are things we can do. And it's become so serious. I get people contacting me saying, "I've got a job offer in Kamloops, but I'm afraid of coming because of the smoke." And I'm a fire guy. And I had too much smoke this year. And that's a rare thing. Wear a mask if you're outside, especially if you're doing strenuous activity. That's where masks came from, was those N95s were for smoke. That's where it started, those masks. So wear a mask if it's really bad, or if you have a respiratory problem. Yeah, there are things we can do. But yeah, it's a serious health issue. And the more we know about smoke, the more we know it's really bad for us.
Yeah. I think the macro issue.
This summer I was in distress. I've had some smoke exposures from just local people burning garbage while I was using a reel mower, a pushy mower. And it really damaged my lungs, and I suffered for quite a few years. And so I'm very sensitive to smoke now. And this summer, the smoke started getting so bad that I was worried because I wasn't breathing properly. I was feeling dizzy. I was so tired. And so I went to the Health Canada website, and there's a lot of great resources on the BC website as well. And I sort of went through the list. And so I was able to get like the best possible furnace filter, make sure that the air conditioner was circulating indoor air only. It helped to reduce the particulate in the house, but wasn't good enough. So I got a room air filter and then blocked off the room and circulated the air. And I could feel my lungs starting to loosen up. And then when I went outside, I really made sure to wear my N95 mask, because without that, it was getting scary. So I think it's really important for people to, I'm not presently on asthma medication, but with people, if they hear that there is a smoke day coming, or just to prepare for the season, I think it's really important, if you do need medication, to in advance get that medication so it's ready to go. If the medication's still not working, like with any of this stuff, if there's always a point at which it is not working, you're not safe, get out, get to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
So that's I think an important point too, is that we can prepare for all of these things as much as we can, but there's always a tipping point when you need to get out and get extra help.
Right.
That makes sense. I think the macro issue is obviously climate change, right? We live in an area with fires or flooding or bad weather, increasing storms. I think that last one in Mexico that went from a category 1 to category 5 in 2 hours or something like that. I mean, this is crazy stuff that's happening. And so one of the things from a technology standpoint, having that as my background, I kind of, one of the things I was thinking is like, can't we not put like sort of, IoT, Internet of Things type sensors in the forest, so that, when there's a heat change, or, smoke detector, is there not a faster way that we can get to these fires or signal that this is an issue, get in there and curb it? Like from a technology standpoint, are these solutions viable? Are people working on them? Just curious, on things like that, if those are types of solutions that are being looked at.
So yes, people are looking at items like Internet of Things and using sensors. Most fires are reported by the public these days. The cell phone is the biggest reason for that. Okay. And it's really important because the earlier you detect the fire, the earlier you can action. Like when I say it's challenging to put a fire out, there's a window, and that window is when it starts. And it can be as little as 20 minutes when things are extreme. But if you get to it, the experienced crew can put that fire out, no problem. Okay, so detecting it. We use satellites and we use aircraft, and sometimes we use drones to map fires. So that kind of information is important. There's some great apps out there. BC Wildfire Service, for example, you can report a fire from your app. You can take a picture of it. You can geotag it, locate it, so they know exactly where it is and what it's looking like. And so, we have to back up here a bit, because not all fire is bad. Okay, if a fire starts 2 kilometers from Timmins, you want to put it out. Okay, but if it starts 50 or 100 kilometers north of Timmins, maybe you don't want to put it out. Many of our forests survive and thrive in a fire regime that's semi-regular, stand replacing, high intensity fire. They're adapted to it. And so sometimes we've been fighting Mother Nature rather than working with Mother Nature. So we have to make a determination. Do we let that fire burn and just monitor it, or do we put it out aggressively? And that decision has to be made within a few minutes after you detect it. So, and I think we still have a long ways to go, because the Indigenous people have been in Canada for many thousands of years, and we're using fire. And then Europeans came and said, no, you don't do this. Okay. But they seem to be in better harmony with the land than some of the practices we use today. So there's still lots we can learn from using fire as a tool. And that helps prevent some of these catastrophic fires we're seeing.
Yeah. So controlled burn.
Something I found really fascinating was this whole notion of controlled burns that are used to get carbon offset credits in Australia. So the idea is that if you do a prescribed or controlled burn, you calculate how much carbon dioxide is generated. And then the Australian government has calculated, if you're able to have a controlled burn that can be stopped, and is a low intensity fire, how much savings of large burned catastrophic fires can that generate? And so what they're doing is they're providing carbon offset credits for a prescribed fire in Australia. That's something that we could consider here. It seems very counterintuitive. Why would you burn something to get a carbon credit? But the reality is, if you can have these many small fires that are low intensity, it's less likely that a giant fire, high intensity fire with lots and lots of fuel built up on the land, will ignite and keep moving, because there's lots and lots of vegetation as opposed to lots of patchiness that will give the opportunity for the fire to stop. So that's something really interesting to think about. It's not just about reducing fuels, it's potentially using flames to reduce the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere, which then can help reduce the progression of climate change.
Yeah, really interesting. Getting to the end of the session here, so just maybe to land the plane a bit, a question to both of you in your respective fields. So if you had to lay out like a solution, and I know this is kind of a big, hairy question, but maybe like the top 3 things you think that need to be done, Mike, to help us solve this issue, or curb the trend we're seeing in forest fires, wildfires.
Mike, you want to go first? That's a big question.
Yeah, there's many parts to that, and and maybe that's an important aspect. We'll need multi-pronged solution. There's no quick one solution here. Okay, but to me, prevention and mitigation, every dollar we spend saves you money down the road. So, and we do a half decent job with prevention. I think we can do better, of course, and mitigation. At the end of the day, every human caused fire is preventable, and we're making progress. But if a fire doesn't start, it won't do any damage. So that's where I would put my emphasis on. I mean, yes, emergency management has different phases: prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Fire management's really good at response. Okay. Preparation, yeah, there's some room for improvement, but I think your best bang for your buck is prevention and mitigation. And we're doing some work, but there's room for significant improvement.
Thanks, Mike. Cheryl.
Okay, well, I'll give it a shot. In the work that we do in communities, I see that there's a really big gap for community leaders as well as residential and business owners, for them to understand their risks. They need really simple, user-friendly tools to understand their community level exposure to these hazards. And then they need really simple tools for the home and business level to say, what is my risk? What is my opportunity to reduce risk? What are some simple resources and finances I can access? So having access to community scale and home scale or business scale tools is really, really important. There's bits and pieces that's we're working together on that, but the sooner that we can provide those to communities in the most cost-effective, non-technical, accessible way, that's critically important. The last piece that needs to all be wrapped into that is, like I was mentioning, the alert system, the emergency preparedness, because in every situation you prepare for fire, flood, hail, heat, etc., but you also have to prepare to leave, because there's always going to be a point that you need to grab your home, your children, your pets, your neighbors, and get out safely. So I think that the risk assessment tools, along with the practical guidance and a well understood, easy to access alerting system, is critically important.
So
Sounds
yeah,
good.
emergency management. Every community needs an emergency management plan for flood, fire, earthquake, and many of them don't have it. Some, like Metro Vancouver, has a great one. It actually takes into account climate change, which is another whole area that many communities don't. But many communities are so small, they don't have the resources to do this. And it's really needed. And I really want to emphasize something Cheryl said: communication, especially during crisis, it has to be there. It has to be reliable. We saw in Maui, for example, they didn't turn the sirens on because, oh, those are for tsunamis. Well, I think people are smart enough to turn the siren on, they'll look and say, smell smoke or see the flames, that, yeah, okay, that's not a tsunami. That's because there's a fire. So we have to have better communication. I hear this all the time. Communication is critical in emergencies.
It really makes me think too. When I was in public school, everyone, and actually my kids too, all the kids had to do a fire safety plan and practice their evacuation routes. We did it at school as well. And so when there was a fire drill at school, for example, we knew what to do. We got out calmly and safely. We practiced at our house because that was our little task, and we had a map. And so we all practiced. So we already knew what to do and could leave calmly. I think in some way at a community scale, we need to do that, particularly with high risk communities. People need to understand where they need to go to find shelter. They need to understand the safe access routes. If they don't have a car, how can they access transit to get out? We need to practice so that people don't panic, and they know to grab Aunt Gerda down the street and grab the dog so that they're ready to go.
Sounds good. I'm just taking notes for challenge statements. And one last fun question. The water planes that drop water on fires, is this still a thing? Is it still effective? I feel like that's kind of old technology. It just seems like these massive fires. You have this little plane coming across and sprinkling water. I don't know. It just is it still an effective tool, or we need to look at other tools?
So it can be effective in the right circumstance. When the fire is small, it can be very effective. But the bottom line is the boots in the ground, those men and women who fight the fires, they put out the fires. But the aircraft can buy them time, and especially during the initial attack when the fire is small, or when a fire is actually entering a community, they can help. All right. And
Yeah.
yes, they're still a thing. Very big in Ontario because there's lots of lakes, but
Yeah.
we use them in BC as well. We call it skimmers, water bombers.
Skimmers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure they pick up a lot of fish. Also, one last thing. Then you talked about boots on the ground. What are the sort of the talent gaps or human capital gaps in this sector right now? Is it in research? Is it in firefighting? Just curious, or awareness, Cheryl, like what you're doing. Where do you think we have talent gaps? Because a part of Prepper, that's what we do is training and upskilling. So just curious on what your thoughts are with that question.
Well, it depends on who you ask, I guess, but certainly we could use some more support for the prevention education piece. In Canada, only about 10% of our public dollars are spent on prevention programming. And I've been talking to firefighters, and it's very interesting and frustrating that as with many industries, a lot of people are aging out, and there are not young people coming into the profession to replace them. So we're actually facing a talent shortage in terms of firefighters across the country. So it's something that we need to look at to encourage more people to start volunteering with a firefighting service, finding out why people aren't joining, and trying to address those challenges. We really need a lot more people entering to support those who are retiring.
Yeah, recruitment and retention's a real issue. It's if you're fighting fires, it's a hot job, it's a smoky job, and at times it's a dangerous job, or can be. So yeah, it's a significant concern across Canada, across the United States, and I don't see it going away. We need more people fighting fires and doing research, and I expect the demand to increase.
Yeah. Sounds good, guys. I think we'll end it here. Thank you, Mike Flanagan, for your expertise and insights. I'm leaving this a lot more aware of the issue. Hopefully 2024 isn't as bad as 2023. And this helps inspire some young people to get into this line of work. Cheryl, thank you for your viewpoint on educating us and being more aware, so that we, as Mike said, prevent fires instead of having to fight them. I think your work is really important there. So thank you for your insights. And now James and I will go to the live challenge session. So Cheryl, I know we went over time. You guys can pop off. Thank you. James and I will continue with the rest. We'll send you the challenge statements. And so thanks again, guys. We'll kind of take it from here and run the challenges with the group that we have.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
And good to see you again, Mike.
I could see you, Cheryl. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. So for the rest of us that are hanging in, we're going to get to the live session now. Just going to bring this up. So if you're interested in doing this part, like I said, you could win $500, a Visa gift card for first prize. Second prize is $250. So definitely worth it. And this presentation is shared with potential employers. So a chance to showcase your knowledge and inspire innovation. So for your presentation, just really these 4 areas: definition of the problem, and do a SWOT analysis, so strength, weakness, opportunity, threats, and how we plan on implementing it. So looking at the what we have here is challenge statements. What are we going to say? I think I'm going to put this one in here in the chat right now, which is how can we improve emergency communication during emergencies? Sorry, this is happening on the fly. So basically, how can we improve emergency communication and ensure that there's safe access routes in areas with high concentration of vulnerable people? So how can we build an app to make this work better? You can choose that as one of your statements to tackle. The other one is this one here that I'm going to put in. Is this, which is, what are your suggestions to increase awareness regarding behavioral actions that can lead to human-caused fires? So what Cheryl just mentioned is, kind of like recycling, right? We all learned the benefits of recycling in school, and we have a knowledge of how to protect our environment from pollution in that regard. So maybe there's some ideas you guys have around how we can build better awareness about the issue of forest fires, something that is part of our life in Canada. And so maybe we'll stop there. And what we'll do, James and I will go to table 1 and table 2. I'll be at table 1. James will be at table 2. Please come to those tables if you need support in the session and in completing the challenge. So we'll take about, 15 minutes or so to have you guys. And again, this is not we don't really need super in depth. 1 or 2 statements around, how you would define the problem, a solution, and how you plan to implement it. Okay. So again, we're just going to go to our breakout tables and you can meet us there. See you all soon.